Amersham. So Amersham was is maybe a type 2 company before it got bought by GE. So one of their crucial technologies is imaging technology. They first had a brain imaging technology called Ceretec, and subsequently they built a heart and bone imaging system using technetium. So technetium isonitrile was first identified as a good heart imaging product by Harvard and MIT. And once the technology was understood to have potential, Harvard and MIT knew that they are not really going to be the ones to manufacture it and take it global. And they were willing to join with Amersham. Amersham partnered with various companies to create products, and they were able to come out with a product that competed with DuPont, which was a big gap to close in technology. And subsequently, they also tied up, after getting FDA approval from America, with several hundred radiopharmacies in the US. But the really big change in the technology came when Amersham was acquired by GE. And GE was the technology company that took it from a type 2 strategy to a type 3 strategy. And today, the entire process of bone scanning, nuclear imaging, and heart scanning is maintained by GE from the point or the source of technology of molybdenum-99 to the customer. There is no technology, even if you go to any of the scan centers here, Anderson Scan, Bharat Scan, whatever, they know no patents of GE. So all the patents of GE are held by GE, and no aspect of the technology comes out except the customer service. So this is one of the very mature models of type 3 firms. An additional and very interesting aspect of the Indian market is that if you do find an SME industry in India, it's a good idea to collaborate. So in certain areas, there is no SME industry in India. Aerospace, for instance. There is to be a big aerospace park that's coming up near Sriperumbudur. There is no indigenous aerospace industry. If that is the case, then a type 2 firm can go in for a type 1 strategy because there is nobody to collaborate with. And from there, move on to a type 3 strategy rather than going in for a type 4 where they talk to vendors. Again, it's not essential that all models have to follow from type 1 to type 4. If you manage to integrate certain elements of strategy from various aspects, then you can create a very strong, mature model, like just adding a supply chain component to a type 1 strategy could turn it into a type 4 strategy. So when you go through the toolkit and you're able to identify what kind of company you are and what are the resource allocations that you can make. Are you going to make the allocation towards your legal resources? Are you going to make the allocation towards your R&D resources? Are you going to make your allocation to the supply chain resources? Based on this, you can actually decide on a mature model which will have a long-term impact on your business. So, some other questions that we can ask in building the strategy are the social, cultural, and political goals of India or your customer base or your city in alignment with your own? And can you strengthen the local economy with your technology? There is a great technology appetite, as I kept repeating. So it is possible that if you are able to align your goals with the goals of the market, you might have a good outcome. India is not a country where you can make a lot of money in the short term. It's difficult to do that because the market is very varied. But if you're willing to make a long-term investment and commitment, then definitely there are huge outcomes to be made. One of the ideas that is being used by Samsung is to cover every strategy, every strata of society with a Samsung product. This is a very interesting strategy because it's all about de-featuring the same technologies that you already have. So by providing a product at every strata of society, they are able to maintain a global loyalty or universal loyalty within their market. A similar strategy is also being applied by Hindustan Unilever. You will find the same products in different categories, different price ranges, customized for regional products and customized for the regional market, change of names, change of language in the labeling and so on, which could actually help to maintain your technology and your patents over the entire universal market of India. In a part of the toolkit has to do with contracts. So if you would open page 73 of your toolkits, you'll find that there are sample clauses with Indian contract law. So I have to thank our partners, Giridhar and Sai Associates, for providing this very important information. One of the things that we found was that Indian business entities are very different from UK business entities, and probably from other parts of the world as well. One very interesting business entity in India is the Hindu undivided family, or a co-parsonary. And very often, successors in the legal heirs of that company are not clearly defined. The CEO is not clearly defined. We have worked with companies where there is a lady CEO because there is a subsidy if it's headed by a woman, but actually she's not the person in power. So what is important to understand is that the contracts have to be drafted or at least vetted by a local attorney who is able to understand the entity that they are working with. This helps in creating the reliable outcomes that you're looking for through contracts. The other thing is what is called the triple N agreements. These are essential in India and China. A triple N agreement is a non-compete, non-disclosure, and non-circumvention agreement. In fact, one of the clients that we recently worked with signed such a triple N agreement with his vendor and found that his vendor was supplying technologies, supplying the same product to the buyer of my client. And when my client went and asked the vendor, how can you supply it in spite of signing a triple N agreement with me? He said, I didn't read the agreement. So a triple N agreement is only as useful as the person who signs it. So even if you have a good agreement, ensure that your vendor or whoever you're signing it with understands what they are signing and agree to it. So most of the vendors will be speaking English and most of the contracts are in English, but a lot of the proceedings may also be in regional languages. Compulsory licensing is a real possibility. It is a market reality. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? This is not the place to debate it. But if you're not working your patent, if you've filed a patent and the patent is not being worked in India, if you're not supplying your market, if it's too expensive, it will get compulsorily licensed. So if you're bringing IP into India, ensure that it's worked and ensure that it's locally worked and your customers are served by your product. India-specific due diligence is important. Manpower and talent power are two different things. So if you're a Foxconn, you need manpower, you need hands and feet. But if you're in IT, you need talent. And they are two different animals, and your lawyer will be able to tell you how to work with each of them. Your manpower possibly will not be able to read your contracts, but your talent power will be, and they will be able to find loopholes as well. So it's important to work with a local lawyer. Labeling and packaging is very different in India than it is in many other countries, and you may need regional labeling, you may need cultural labeling. Like green in India is not organic, it's vegetarian, whereas in the rest of the world green is organic. So culture-specific labeling is essential. And litigation. So litigation is a new animal in India. It's very different. China is better. If you do have a case, it's better to have a Chinese case because it's cheaper. China also has a better contract enforcement index. When you look at the ease of doing business, China is far ahead of us. So litigation also is a real possibility, and it's good to avoid litigation as far as possible. The last part of the toolkit, which you will see from page 82 onwards, is the real data that we have collected from interviews. And this is a wide-ranging interview or the survey. One of the reasons is when you get a lawyer talking, then they talk about everything that they go through. But even if you get to sit with a CEO or a production engineer or an R&D head, they do tend to talk about a number of things. And although initially we wanted to restrict it to IP, we thought, why not just share it? So there is a lot about vendor management. One question that people ask is, how do you find an Indian JV partner? And a very pertinent answer that I got is, don't go by the UKTI's Queen's birthday party list. No, it's there in the book. So please do not go by social entities. Try to find a partner who's equal to you in size, who has an equal reputation to maintain. If you find a partner who has no reputation to maintain, who's a very small company, they will definitely violate your IP. But if you have a company which has a reputation to maintain, which intends to have many global partners, they will protect your IP. Similarly, if you have, should you work in India independently or should you have a partner? Depends entirely on the strategy that you have and whether you are able to find the appropriate India CEO or COO and whether you're able to create this core team. So the question naturally came up, how do you create an India core team? And one of the ideas that we got was find a person who's worked with you in the UK, who wants to come back. And this would be a very good starting point. And if you can take every member of your core team back to your home country and keep training them so that they stay within the culture and standards of that company. Again, employee training, bringing IP into India, protecting the IP of Indian collaborators. While there is a lot of talk about Indians not protecting British IP, there is also a lot of information that I got from Indian SMEs that their British partners and their German partners don't really respect their developments. So when you're in a co-development mode, then it's better to share your IP and to share the benefits rather than to see that your Indian partner does not benefit. Do Indians prefer counterfeits if they are cheaper? It depends on the buyer. That's what the answer to that is. Maintaining